Check, check. everyone. And we're here for the Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection. It is Tuesday, February 9th, 9 a.m. We're in room 325 at the State Capitol. And this morning, first up on the agenda, we have House Bill 1333 relating to energy. This is requiring the State Energy Office to conduct a study to determine best practices for disposal and recycling of discarded clean energy technology products. And first up, we have the Hawaii State Energy Office, Scott Glenn.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Vice Chair, members of the committee. This is Scott Glenn, Chief Energy Officer, and would just like to add a note to our written testimony with comments that we have been hearing in our community meetings an increasing concern about waste associated with renewable energy technologies. While we recognize this is a challenging budget year, this is an emerging issue that we are giving more attention to. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we just have two additional testifiers, Zero Waste Big Island and one individual in support. Was there anyone else to testify here to testify on this measure in person? If not, members, any questions? All right, if not, we'll move on to the next bill on the agenda. This is relating to energy and authorizes government agencies to wheel electricity to each other, basically. And first up, we have DCCA, the Consumer Advocate.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Dean Ishin for the Division of Consumer Advocacy. We stand on our written testimony available for questions, if any.
Thank you. And the Public Utilities Commission.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. We stand on our written testimony, also and available for questions. Thank you.
And Life of the Lands.
We stand on our testimony, noting that there are great difficulties if we were to implement wheeling, and we're available for questions.
And then Hawaiian Electric.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kevin Katsura. I'm Director of Regulatory Affairs for Hawaiian Electric, and we're testifying in opposition of 1290. Generally, wheeling this bill would take the largest customer, which is the government agencies, away from the, I guess, the pool of people that would be looking for renewable energy, and it basically would slow down our renewable energy goals. I think this bill actually allows the government to implement wheeling, and it hasn't addressed the critical issues such as financial costs and impacts to non-wheeling customers, as well as what the compensation would actually be. I think it's very complex, and it competes with some of the existing renewable energy goals that we have already going with our RFPs for phase 1 and phase 2 already in the works. For us to be competing for renewable energy projects with the government, who will be also looking for renewable energy projects for wheeling, would create difficulty within the system and make it more difficult to acquire lower cost renewable energy for all customers. And also, I just want to note that we went through a 2-year process, basically going through performance-based regulation, which just the legislature passed, and we're still in that process, and it has incentives to actually accelerate renewable energy. And I think throwing major policy changes at this point would just complicate the matter, and we don't want to have to revisit that framework anytime soon before we even get it off the ground. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And then we just have a couple other individuals in support and some testimony from the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party. Is there anyone else on the call who was planning to testify on this in person? If not, members, questions? I guess I'll have a quick couple questions for Public Utilities Commission.
Sure, Chair.
Can you tell us what the status is of the open dockets that still are pending on this issue, like the microgrids docket, or what discussion is happening about grid services and how to value those?
Sure. I think there's probably 3. I think the Consumer Advocate's testimony highlighted some of the dockets too. There's really 3 areas where this touches on. As you noted, the microgrid docket, going back to an order last fall, I believe it was, we had, within the context of that, we had offered opportunity for what we called regulatory flexibility for NELHA, understanding that they have a demonstration project going on there. There had also been bills, touching on that last year. So we opened that door, and based on the report that came back to us, they were not interested at the time. So that was maybe a little surprising, but I think it signaled our openness to looking. I think our idea is to try and look at this concept within the context of one easily defined campus and customer. As Mr. Katsura talked about, I mean, they're really fundamentally here. It is a question about what's the cost of using utilities infrastructure. Can be an in-depth, complicated topic. So we tried to open the door in a way, in a confined, using that demonstration project and facility. Apparently there wasn't interest on the part of NELHA for the time being, but I'm not sure if that has changed. Hawaiian Electric has filed what's been termed a green tariff with the commission, and this is a similar concept with the University of Hawaii. We're currently under review of that. We have the CBRE program, which is in essence a form of wheeling. And as you talked about, we are reviewing grid services contracts. We have reviewed and approved those in the distributed energy resources docket. We're looking at the next generation of programs to enable grid utilities use of customer sited resources. So I think off the top of my head, that's a quick rundown of where we stand at the moment. I would offer, we did close the old intergovernmental wheeling docket. That was well over a decade old. A lot of the participants in that believe their entities were not even active anymore. So I think we closed that, but we also at the time we looked at opening up the idea or the opportunity at the NELHA campus. So I think that's a summary of the current status in the dockets open at the commission.
And I guess, do you follow-up question? And this could be for Hawaiian Electric also. Is there what is being done now to ensure that we're better integrating distributed resources and using those and distributed storage as well to the maximum benefit of customers?
I can start, and then maybe Mr. Katz. I think in a few contexts we have tried to speed. Well, earlier on in the beginning of the COVID emergency, we issued a statement from the commission, asking people for ideas on how to facilitate renewable energy development is one of the ways to help with recovery. The solar industry, their first concept back to the commission and others was to speed the interconnection process. So those groups working with Hawaiian Electric under the umbrella of one of our dockets have brought together proposals to speed interconnection of rooftop solar and storage systems. I think that's probably the most recent significant improvement, and they're looking to significantly improve on the timelines for interconnection. We have approved 3 grid services contracts now. So these will aggregate rooftop, all types of distributed resources, but primarily rooftop solar paired with energy storage for customers in all 3 companies. So for Helco, MECO, and Hawaiian Electric, there's a significant step forward. Sorry, my dog's barking at me. And I think another big part of this will be the next round, the next phase of the community renewables program. I think we're actively working with the stakeholders on expanding the scope of that, simplifying and improving the interconnection process.
Thanks. And I guess Hawaiian Electric, did you want to add anything or?
Yeah, just I agree with what Jay said in terms of everything that's going on. You can see that we're actually doing quite a bit of things, and we need all the renewable energy that we can get. So the PUC has been very adamant, as well as the CA and the companies, in terms of trying to get as much distributed generation onto the system, but we're doing it in a safe and reliable way, just so that we make sure that the people who is going to be affected, so that the costs and everything are reasonable. So it's very complex issues, but the PUC is very much and the stakeholders are very much involved. We talked at length about this within the PBR context as well. So I think in terms of moving on these things, we're moving at a rapid pace, and we continue to do so.
All right, and I guess last question on this bill for Henry Life of the Land. I guess historically you've been really supportive of wheeling, and this year your comments were lukewarm at best. So I was just curious if it was your opinion that because of the more work moving forward on integrating distributed resources and aggregating those, that you felt like this is not the conversation we need to be having right now, or what has led to your change of heart?
Wheeling was first proposed when there was very little distributed generation on the grid, and it was conceived as a concept to increase renewable energy penetration. The grid has become very complex today, and the PUC and HECO, we fully support their position. There are a lot of other things that are advancing renewable energy now, and we should stay on the course of those things rather than embark on a brand new program.
All right, thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to next bill on the agenda, House Bill 803, relating to electric vehicles. This authorizes each county to adopt ordinances to enforce the requirement that parking lots over a certain size have EV charger, and requires they keep it in working order. And first up to testify, we have Hawaii State Energy Office.
Aloha, Chair. Good morning. The Energy Office stands on its written testimony with comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Hawaiian Electric.
Good morning, Chair. Hawaiian Electric also stands on its written testimony providing comments.
Blue Planet Foundation.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Jeff Piccolino with Blue Planet Foundation. Blue Planet stands on its testimony in support of House Bill 803 to add some teeth to our 12-year-old parking requirements. Thank you.
And then we have Tesla.
Yes, Chair Lowen, this is Sandy Wong on behalf of Tesla. Tesla supports this bill. We are offering one friendly amendment because, as Mr. Michelina said, this is a 12-year law. And so we are proposing, instead of a 1 stall requirement, to increase the requirement to 5. Thank you.
And then we have Retail Merchants of Hawaii, Tina Yamaki.
Aloha and good morning. Thank you for letting us testify today. We're opposed to this bill. We like to see something that's more statewide. We have been trying to maintain all of our EV charging stations, but what we're finding out is it's the residents that live around there, or people who don't want to increase their electric bill. They're coming into our shopping malls and our retail areas to charge their car. And if I can't charge mine because you're charging your car, they end up physically breaking our equipment, and we're constantly having to fix it. And sometimes it's not that easy because we have to have people come in from the mainland. It's better if this was a statewide law. We understand why some people want more parking spaces for EV, especially since, especially like Tesla and stuff, their sales have been going up. But we also have to remember that on the neighbor islands and in rural areas on Oahu, a lot of people do not have electric cars, and the stalls that they have already, they're not being used. When we build shopping centers or we have our standalone areas, we always look at what the customer's needs are. And so we ask that you look at that too, because it is going to cost the consumer money, because we're going to be passing that cost on down to them. Thank you.
Thanks. And then we have Ron Riley.
Yeah, good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity. I submitted written testimony. I just like to add that as a driver of an EV for the last 5 years, I've had many occasions to use commercial EV charging stations around Hawaii Island. And the problems that I think this bill would address, some retail charging stalls charge excessively high fees. Some are in poor, difficult to access locations, and some are left unbroken for months and even years. So in my testimony, I mentioned an excellent free phone app by the name of PlugShare, which allows EV users to comment on their experience at various charging stations. And I just refer you to that as an excellent source to find what customers are actually experiencing as a problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then we have a number of other organizations in support, as well as 32 individuals who sent in testimony in support. Was there anyone else here who wanted to testify on this measure? All right, if not members, any questions? I guess I have a quick question for Tina Yamaki from Retail Merchants. I'm a little confused with the testimony about people wanting to charge their cars for free, because this law does not require that for free electricity.
Well, what
in additional, with the question of a statewide law, this is a statewide law regarding the requirements. What we're allowing for is that each county can adopt ordinances to enforce, because right now there's no pathway to allow for enforcement of this existing law, because it's typically counties and county police forces that do enforcement. So I don't think there's necessarily an inconsistency statewide about what the requirements are for the retail locations.
I think the thing that we're looking at is, does it open it up for the counties to start putting in more requirements? And it is easier to enforce if it is statewide. Okay.
Although the counties could do that via their building codes. That's very clearly a county jurisdiction, but this bill does not open it up to each county to implement different requirements other than what exists under that existing statute, just to do the enforcement.
Okay. And the other
Members,
thing I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I think the other thing was, it's who's going to be doing the enforcement, because, when you have people that are not law enforcement people coming on, who's going to take up that liability? Because then, the shopping malls and the retailers are also going to have a higher liability if somebody gets hurt, because you're in a parking where there's cars moving around. So I think that's our concern.
I think county authorities, it doesn't mandate private security force do enforcement. But any other questions, members? Okay. Then we will go on to next bill on our agenda, House Bill 1142. This establishes a surcharge on the sale of gas-powered vehicles with an MSRP over $50,000, and that funding will be funneled to fund the electric vehicle charging system rebate program. And first up, we have Department of Taxation, Representative Choi.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Titin Sakata on behalf of Director Choi. We stand on our testimony, providing comments and available for a question, if any. Thank you.
Thank you. Public Utilities Commission.
Good morning, Chair. Yeah, we stand on our written testimony, offering comments and available for questions as well. Thank you.
Hawaii State Energy Office.
Morning, Chair. We stand on our written testimony, offering comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Tax Foundation of Hawaii. Oh, we can't hear you, Mr. Yamachika.
Hello, is this better?
A little bit.
Thank
Still
you.
very quiet, but we can hear you a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Tom Yamachika from Tax Foundation of Hawaii. Our concern is with this is a tax increase. I understand it's temporary, but the legislature in general has a poor record of keeping things temporary. And we also have concerns with the special fund that bypasses the normal budgeting process. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Then we have Big Island EV Association, Albert Beeman. Not present. Hawaiian Electric.
Hawaiian Electric stands on its written testimony supporting the intent. Thank you.
Thank you. Blue Planet Foundation.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Blue Planet Foundation strongly supports House Bill 1142, which is a revenue neutral approach to provide funding to build out our electric vehicle infrastructure, provide chargers. So what's really clever about this bill is the approach it takes. Instead of using taxpayer dollars to pay for new EV chargers, it provides a small fee on high-end luxury gas vehicles. Those that are contributing to climate change that are well above the average vehicle price in Hawaii. And then using that fee in the existing rebate program to help provide chargers, particularly those for workplaces and for multifamily buildings. This is the major barrier to people adopting electric vehicles in Hawaii, is the lack of charging infrastructure, particularly where they live and particularly where they work. We really need folks to charge at work when folks head back to work, so we can absorb a lot of that extra renewable energy in the middle of the day. So this is a very, very creative approach to not tap our general funds, but instead help use the problem to help address our need for charging. So we support House Bill 1142 as this clever approach, what some people call a fee bait, to help foster adoption of electric vehicles. Thanks for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And next we have JN Automotive. Brad Nikolai. All right, we'll move on to Alliance for Automotive Innovation, Tiffany Yajima.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and Tiffany Yajima, representing the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. I do have Kurt Augustine on the call with us today, and he's the Director of Government Affairs out of California, and he'd be happy to testify on this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. As Tiffany mentioned, I work for the trade association that represents the automakers who produce 99% of the vehicles sold in the United States, as well as many of the technology providers for those vehicles. This one-time surcharge on these gas-powered vehicles does not just impact high luxury vehicles purchased by wealthy consumers. This is a tax that impacts vehicles purchased by all segments of consumers. This additional tax will disproportionately impact farmers, contractors, tradesmen, and other small business owners who have the need for large vehicles and pickups. Additionally, consumers with large families or special interests will be hit hard by this tax due to their need for larger vehicles. Currently, there are no pickup trucks available for sale in the United States that are not powered solely by gasoline. And with the average cost of those pickups being approximately $50,000, the majority of pickup buyers in Hawaii would then be assessed this surcharge with no options to meet their family and work needs. They would have to pay the tax. Furthermore, vehicles that are priced below this price range may be subject to the tax and with the various options that are added on. So vehicles that would be perhaps potentially less money will get over that boundary. But also, this is a bit of an arbitrary price point when it comes to the environment as well. Just because a vehicle costs more does not mean it is detrimental to the environment. There's no logical connection between price and environmental harm. In fact, the US EPA and the US Department of Energy says the most fuel efficient mid-size station wagon sold in the United States has a cost of over $50,000. Additionally, most of the most fuel-efficient full-size vehicles have a higher cost than the $50,000 threshold. So this higher tax could actually drive many cost-conscious consumers to purchase a less fuel-efficient vehicle. And it's for these reasons that we are opposed to this bill and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And then next we have Hawaii Energy.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Hawaii Energy stands on its written testimony and is here to answer questions if needed. Thank you.
Thank you. And Hawaii Auto Dealers Association.
Morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin, members of the committee. I'm David Rolfe with the Hawaii Auto Dealers Association. HADA opposes this bill simply because we've seen the luxury taxes in the past just have not worked, and especially one that would be just established by one state. Because what the customers would do is they would simply go purchase from another state and ship their vehicles in. There was a federal luxury tax from 1990 to 2002. It was discontinued. It taxed vehicles, the price of vehicles, but not any trucks, by the way, or SUVs, only cars above $30,000. It taxed the amount above that at 10%, but even that was reduced down to 4% over the years before it was all canceled. I guess I can just simply say that we've looked at Canada, who's tried to establish a luxury tax like this, and they said that their sales went down in that province because people just went and purchased from the province right next door. We've seen that happen in Hawaii before when there was an attempt to look at something like this, but we can just simply say that we oppose it because it would hurt the state tax revenues, it would hurt businesses, and most of all, it would cause a loss of jobs. So HADA is in opposition to this bill, and we thank you for the ability to testify, and I'm ready to answer any questions if you'd like.
Thank you. And then we have Tesla.
Yes, thank you, Chair Lowen. This is Sandy Wong on behalf of Tesla. We are in support of HB 1142. We would echo the testimony of, again, Mr. Michelina. We would add, however, that we would like an amendment to the bill that for some of these monies, besides going to EV charging, to also provide EV rebates to encourage people. So you give them charging, but also to encourage them to purchase more EVs. Thank you.
Thank you. And then it looks like we have additional testimony and support from Mission Zero Hawaii, Ulupono Initiative, Hawaii EV Association, and then from about 22 additional individuals in support. Is there anyone else here to testify on this? If not, members, any questions?
Can I testify?
Rep. Mariyoshi?
Dave Roth, are you still there?
Thank you, Representative.
Good. Thank you for coming. I'm just wondering if you have any opinion on how much the average pickup truck costs in Hawaii, whether this $50,000 price point would affect that.
You know, Kurt is right about that. We had one of our dealers call in and say that several of their pickup trucks, and you've seen the Silverado and you've seen some of the a lot of features on the F-150. Some of these have gone up to $75,000. And that's just one of the major reasons we've opposed this bill. It doesn't just apply to luxury vehicles. That craftsmen and tradesmen and farmers, they all purchase these vehicles. But the biggest reason is that when you put a tax like this on, people simply go and purchase from another state. And that would hurt all businesses here, decrease jobs, and hurt state tax revenues. The GET would go down. Anyway, but I agree that it's over 50,000 for many pickup trucks.
So what percentage of them would you say? And this is the market price. It's not that, you know, a lot of times auto dealers will have deals and kind of mark the price down some, but I know this is on kind of the sticker price. Could you just give me kind of an idea of how many are 50,000 and above? Is it half? Is it 75%? Is it 25%?
You know, we requested that information, thank you, Representative, from TrueCar, because they have all the prices of vehicles sold in a state. And I would hope that they would get back to me. As soon as this bill came out, I shot a message off to them saying, can you give us the number of vehicles above 50,000? As Kurt said, though, since that's the average price of a truck, half of them would be above that. Nowadays, 75% of the vehicles sold in the state are in the truck, SUV, and van category, and only 25% are cars. And that's typical across the country. And it's because of a tax that was established years ago, 25% on inbound trucks. And I can explain that over a longer period of time, but most of the American manufacturers are subsequently SUV, van, and truck manufacturers. And that's the arsenal of democracy. They produce those magnificent vehicles, and they're purchased a lot. So yeah, this tax would apply a lot to trucks, SUVs, and vans. People buy cars because of what they need, cars and trucks because of what they need. That's why they're purchasing these vehicles, because they have a lot of value. Anyway, this would cause purchases out of state, and that's just plain wrong.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
And those comments, I missed the average, yeah. Great, thanks. Maybe for, I have a question for Blue Planet, maybe. I think that you guys may have done some research into vehicle prices in Hawaii. Do you have any idea the answer to the question about the cost of pickups?
I was just curious in listening to the conversation, and I went to the Surfco Honolulu website, and I didn't find any Toyota Tacomas over $45,000. They were all in the 30 to 40,000 range, which strikes me as right, knowing quite a few Toyota Tacoma drivers. And that's, again, what we're really targeting here is luxury vehicles. The average price of vehicles in Hawaii is $32,000 on average. So we feel that 50,000 is really targeting luxury higher end vehicles. And again, this is only gas powered vehicles. We're seeing a lot of electric vehicles of all sorts of models becoming available. And so that's always an option for folks to avoid this fee.
Great, thank you. Brett Martin.
I have a question also for Jeff Nicolina, or if someone else knows, but I was a bit alarmed to hear that 75% of the vehicles bought are trucks or vans or large cars. I can't imagine that 75% of drivers actually have that need. Definitely, we're not all tradespeople. And I wondered to what extent this bill he mentioned there was a tax break or something associated with that, pushing people towards those vehicles. And maybe this bill would be a bit of an equalizer in that.
Perhaps. I mean, we're also struck by the fact that it seems like over 2/3 of buyers are buying large trucks and SUVs. And we really think that has a lot to do with just sort of the culture of vehicles in Hawaii. Not sure if this would provide any sort of disincentive there, because again, it's really targeting 50,000 and above vehicles. But definitely understand where you're coming from, that we ought to find some ways to counter that sort of culture of wanting to buy trucks and large vehicles in Hawaii until they're electric.
Chair, can I ask a follow-up?
Jeff,
could you stay on for 1 second more?
Sure.
Thank you for looking up that information. That is actually very helpful. I'm wondering how many EVs are over $50,000 too, because I'm wondering if we're targeting the luxury brand and this money is going to be going to help EV owners. I mean, if you can afford a $50,000 EV, maybe you should pay the tax too for a charging station that you're going to be using. I mean, I feel like once we reach that price point, those consumers of EVs or luxury EVs might be able to afford that as well, and it would directly benefit them. So I'm just wondering, back when I bought my car, the EV market was pretty sky high. I don't know if it's come down a bunch, or can you kind of give us an idea of what kind of EVs or how many, if any, are at that 50 or over price point?
Sure, I could take a stab, but I'm sure Sandy Wong is probably eager to jump in and speak for Tesla and Tesla owners, because those are largely the vehicles that are on the higher end. Although they are coming down, they have models like the Model 3 that's more accessible. And there are a number of other high-end luxury electric vehicles as well. I would be curious to see, I imagine the vast majority, because the Nissan Leaf is very popular. I have a Volkswagen that was $25,000. There are a number of far more affordable General Motors with their Bolt, Kia, Niro. They have a number of models that are in the $30,000 to $40,000 range. So I don't know exactly what the average of the electric vehicles sold in Hawaii is. I imagine maybe Dave Rolfe might have that information. But interesting question about whether this ought to apply to electric vehicle owners or vehicles over $50,000. I think the other thing that is interesting about the measure is targeting gas vehicles, because again, there's sort of a polluter pays principle here, where those who are contributing to climate change ought to be providing some for the solution. And that's why maybe that's carved out as gasoline-only vehicles.
That's true, but on the same token, I mean, the people who are using the charging stations maybe should be paying for some of it too. If it's the luxury, I'm not talking about targeting the Leafs. We're talking about targeting the $70,000, $80,000 Teslas. Just kind of a thought. I don't know if Tesla has an opinion on it. I'm sure they must. If she's still on.
All right, any further questions, members? Okay, I think we'll move on from this one. I think we can guess Tesla's position on that. So we'll move on to House Bill 1140. This is relating to electric vehicles, again, requiring 4 new construction permits for commercial buildings and multi-unit dwellings and state buildings, that the parking stalls are EV charger ready or have energy management systems that deliver a certain number of kilowatts of energy. And first up, we have Hawaii State Energy Office.
Thank you, Chair. The Energy Office stands on its written testimony offering comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have additionally from HSEO on this list, Chris Yunker. Just on the call for questions, I think.
I'm here to answer questions as needed.
Thank you. And then we have Blue Planet Foundation.
Thanks, Chair. Members of the committee, I'm sure you're tiring of me, so I will be brief, but Blue Planet Foundation supports House Bill 1140. Just 2 clarifying remarks about this measure. One, this simply requires the EV-ready infrastructure be installed. So basically the wiring, the conduit, making sure there's an endpoint where someone later can actually install an EV charger. Secondly, this allows for an energy management system. And we think this is a really critical part of this measure because it's not going to require these new buildings to install all sorts of electrical capacity upgrades. It makes sure we are efficient with the electricity going to the building and can dole it out to vehicles that are there. This comes from Vancouver, this concept of the energy management system. They have, for a couple of years now, mandated that every new stall built in the city of Vancouver have be EV ready, but they allow this use of an energy management system. In their case, a vehicle just can have access to, I believe it's 12 kilowatts over 8 hours. So making sure that not every car is going to charge at once, and they never would. Just being smart about it. But this bill is critical because we're seeing so many buildings going up that are not prepared for the future, not prepared for this rush of electric vehicles that we're seeing. And it's going to be very costly for residents in the future to have to tear up parking lots, put in wiring, do these simple things that are so much cheaper. In fact, in some cases, 91% cheaper upfront instead of doing it as a retrofit after the fact. Thanks for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Then we have Hawaiian Electric.
Thank you, Chair. Hawaiian Electric stands on its written testimony supporting the intent of this bill.
Thank you. And Tesla. And then we also have Ronald Riley, individual in support.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to highlight one comment in my written testimony, strongly in support of this bill. And I note that Hawaii DBED has reported the trend for adoption of electric vehicles in the state of Hawaii, and the increase in all electric EVs is 42%. That's comparing December 2019 to December 2020. So I think the trend is so obvious and so clear that to require new construction to be ready is just painfully obvious, let me say. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And that is all the people we have signed up for in-person testimony. It looks like we have about 10 additional organizations in support, one in opposition, one offering comments, and then additional about 30, more than 30 individuals testifying in support. Members, are there any questions? I guess a quick question maybe for State Energy Office. I just want to highlight, I guess one of the things that we always talk about with EVs is trying to give equal access or have some equity in the EV conversation so that EVs and the savings that can be realized through EVs are accessible to everyone and not just people who can afford to put solar on their rooftops and charge them at home. And so there is kind of a push and pull, I guess, with this kind of measure, which, is additive, although it's much cheaper to do the readiness requirements up front than to retrofit after the fact. It does add some cost. But at the same time, especially for condos and affordable housing, it seems like this is one of the main ways that we can open up opportunity to own EVs to lower and middle income families. And without that, because of the patterns of EV charging, it would be a lot more challenging for individuals who live in multi-unit dwellings to be able to own an electric vehicle. So what is your guys' view on that trade-off?
Aloha, Chair. This is certainly a trade-off that has been in discussion with the Energy Office, the State Building Code Council, the counties, affordable housing advocates, and others. We certainly believe that EVs should be available to people of all income levels, and the state should be helping to do that. We're aware that the cost of new construction can be a challenge, and any additional requirements will cause folks to examine what that would be in terms of the upfront construction cost. The make-ready requirement is, I think, an approachable compromise in that respect, because we already see that a lot of housing developers are doing make-ready for solar while not necessarily installing solar directly, the panels themselves. I think one of the questions to examine for these larger development projects is to examine the off-site infrastructure that goes along with it. Because oftentimes looking at HECO's planning, for example, for their connector circuits, do they have enough capacity for it in case everyone who does take up the make-ready option put a charger in place? So that's an off-site cost that doesn't necessarily get factored into some of the discussions, but we are aware that affordable housing advocates look at that kind of example as a cost to consider.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, members? Great. Okay, we'll move on to the next bill on the agenda, House Bill 550. This is establishing deadlines for state facilities to undertake energy efficiency measures. Also adds energy efficiency and water efficiency requirements for new construction, and then also adds a provision that data about energy use of state buildings will be publicly available. So first up to testify, we have DAGS, Kurt Otugaro.
Dean Shimomura with DAGS. Morning Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. DAGS stands on its written testimony in support and with comment.
Thank you. Hawaii State Energy Office.
Aloha, Chair. Thank you. We submitted written comments and just a couple brief notes about it. One, we have been working with DAGS, Hawaii Energy, and other state agencies to assess the ability to undertake what the bill proposes. And we've offered some comments in our testimony, proposing some amendments to the language, as well as a program that the state could undertake to implement what the bill is calling for, including some proposed targets that we think could also help hold the state to aiming for concrete results. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have DOE, Randy Tanaka.
Good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin. Thank you very much for your time. We stand by our testimony as submitted. Just a comment regarding costs. We have started a program last summer to evaluate our consumption side of the equation, and the GEMS loan has provided some great funding for extending the efficiency levels. So we continue on this path. The only concern we have is the deadline and the time it's going to take to do evaluations of nearly 12,000 classrooms. But we have started our march in that direction. And I thank you for your patience, and aloha. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Blue Planet Foundation.
Thank you, Chair. Blue Planet will stand on its written testimony in support of House Bill 550.
Thank you. And Hawaii Energy.
Good morning. Hawaii Energy stands in support of House Bill 550 and is here to answer any questions.
Thank you. That is all the people I have on my list signed up for in-person testimony. Was there anyone else here to testify on that? On House Bill 550? All right, if not, we have additional testimony and comments all in support from Johnson Controls, Ulupono Initiative, IBEW, Climate Protectors of Hawaii, and one individual. Members, any questions on this measure? All right, if not, we will move on to House Bill 1316 relating to packaging waste. This is exploring the idea of establishing extended producer responsibility program in Hawaii. And first up, we have Department of Health.
Good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin, and the representatives on the committee. My name is Mike Burke. I'm with the Department of Health's Office of Solid Waste Management. We submitted testimony commenting on this bill and stand on our written testimony. We look forward to working with the committee in exploring options and opportunities to advance EPR.
Thank you. And then we have Hawaii Food Industry Association. With testimony and opposition. Hawaii Restaurant Association, are they on the line?
Hi, good morning, Chair Lowen, members of the Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection. The Hawaii Restaurant Association opposes this bill because this topic is very, very complicated. We took part of the Act 254 Plastic Source Reduction Task Force, and did explore this particular topic at length. And being in a small marketplace in the world economy, the intent of wanting to be green and sustainable is a noble position. However, I do not think that this bill as written is doable for us at this point in time, because there's a lot of pros and cons and unforeseen consequences. So we recommended that further study needs to be done. And at this point in time, we recommend that you please hold this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then we have Sierra Club of Hawaii.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Jody Malinowski testifying on behalf of
Sierra Club. We support this bill. Just want to acknowledge that this is the first of many hearings on this measure, and if the committee chooses to move this forward, we'd be happy to work on additional language to address some of the concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. And Retail Merchants of Hawaii.
Sorry, I didn't unmute. Aloha and good morning again. We are very strongly opposed to this bill. Packaging over the years have changed. You know, we've been trying to use less packaging, but yet also keep the contents of whatever is being shipped safe to our customers. We want to be sure that we have to work together. We were never talked about or consulted with this, and yet we are the ones who are going to be bearing all of the costs to put this program together. And if you guys already know, I mean, we have to pay higher insurance costs, unemployment insurance costs. Everything has gone up. A lot of businesses are just holding on right now. And something like this would be devastating to a lot of our businesses. It's going to make them close. They just can't afford it. And like I said, it's the sole burden is being placed on manufacturers and retailers. You know, we'd have to put a report together, and it's very expensive to do. And we feel it's unreasonable for retailers and manufacturers to be mandated to pick up the total cost of the entire collection and recycling system. So we ask that you hold this bill. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Then we have Surfrider.
Aloha, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Duration. I'm the Oahu Chapter Coordinator, and we stand in strong support of this measure. Extended producer responsibility is a gold standard for, you know, reduction of plastic, reduction of waste overall, and creating a circular economy. Right now, you know, across our state and nation, the very high cost of waste management and waste cleanup falls on taxpayers and government agencies. And so what EPR does is simply share that burden that we all bear with the producers that are creating the products themselves. And I really appreciated that this bill included language that, you know, protect small businesses by saying that it needed to be businesses with a minimum revenue of $1 million. And I think that's really important, that we're not burdening small businesses, but that this is simply to, you know, kind of bring back this concept of the milkman model where, you know, producers that are creating these packaging products are part of that end part of the cycle as well. And we stand on the rest of our testimony.
Thank you. And that is all the, oh wait, we have one additional individual, Gretchen Lozano, in support. Is she on? All right, if not, we have.
I am. Sorry, I'm on. I forgot to unmute. Aloha, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin, and members of the Energy and Environmental Protection Committee. House Bill 1316 is a very progressive yet completely necessary bill in the area of waste management in Hawaii. While it may need some work to make the bill fit our current infrastructure here, I urge you to commit to making this initiative a reality for our communities. I hope this is just the beginning of extended producer responsibility initiatives in Hawaii, because in truth, it's long overdue. And we need a complete overhaul in the way we address the responsibility factors for the waste industry. We need a shift in perception across the board from consumer responsibility to producer responsibility, and to hold these global corporations accountable for the way they package their products. A multi-million or billion-dollar corporation has an infinite number of packaging options from which they can choose, whereas the consumer, often in time, education, and monetary resources, has very little amount of choice, comparatively speaking. From a person in the waste industry who is deeply committed to assisting our islands becoming more sustainable, I know that legislative mandates are 100% necessary in the process of getting us there. Mahalo for your time and consideration.
All right, thank you. And then we have additional testimony from Councilmember Inaba from Hawaii County in support, from County of Maui Department of Environmental Management in support, City and County of Honolulu in support, Hawaii Youth Climate Coalition, Our Revolution Hawaii, Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition 350 Hawaii, Zero Waste Big Island in support. And we also have Flexible Packaging Association in opposition, Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers with comments, Chamber of Commerce in opposition, Island Plastic Bags in opposition, Product Stewardship Institute in support, American Institute for Packaging and the Environment in opposition, Consumer Brands Association in opposition. We have Take Flight Digital in support, American Chemistry Council offering comments, American Cleaning Institute and Pacific Allied Products Limited and Consumer Healthcare Products Association in opposition. And then additional testimony from 37 individuals in support and 1 individual in opposition. And that is all the testimony we have. Members, are there any questions? All right, I'll start with Department of Health. I think your testimony mentioned that this would perhaps work better if there were other states that implemented this as well, because then Hawaii could kind of piggyback on some of those producer responsibility organizations. Can you just explain to us so that everyone listening and the committee members sort of have an understanding of how this works?
Sure. The way we read this legislation or the bill is that we're going to be adding a responsibility for packaging to the manufacturers. But Hawaii is a small state, and we don't have a lot of purchasing power when you look at some of these multinational corporations. And so our fear is that, or our concern would be that the cost of an individual product would go up because that said multinational would make a packaging just for the state, or they would just pull their product from the marketplace here, and that would reduce the choices that consumers have and force consumers into only 1 or 2 brands. And so we know that the state of Washington came close this past year to implementing a similar law. States of Oregon and California as well have been looking at it. And you're talking about 3 huge states, particularly the state of California, where if something similar were enacted along the West Coast, that creates that significant market push for companies to revise their packaging or manage their packaging. And so for us, being a smaller state with in a smaller market, we can then tag along or piggyback with what those states are doing, so that we're not, our consumers aren't unduly harmed, but rather we're all part of a bigger pool.
Thanks. And then another question. I know that I think your testimony and a number of other testifiers referenced the plastic source reduction working group, and the recommendation included in that there should be a study done of EPR for Hawaii. I guess, do you think it would be necessary, or what do you think we would gain from doing a study? There is a study that was done in Washington that maybe answers some of the broader questions that aren't state specific. And then, to what degree do you think we really need a study to understand the issues going forward? Or is it something that we can, maybe we recognize we still need to keep working on it and watch what's happening in other states, but do we need a long-term study that requires an appropriation that would, be contracted out, that would maybe answer some academic questions that, and not necessarily get into the nitty-gritty of how it would be implemented, which is always the hard part. So I guess with that, with that, I guess the question is the study really necessary, or do you think we have enough information to know that maybe we want to move in this direction? It's just a matter of figuring out the right timing.
It's tough to always, to suggest a study because a lot of times that's used as a sandbag method, right? But I think that in this instance, more than anything, the idea that we have with conducting a study is just to understand the impact to the marketplace, the impact to the public on the consumer side. I think that we recognize that there's going to be positive benefits presumably there are going to be positive benefits to the environment. And so I don't know that this is necessarily, or at least in our understanding, we're not looking at this as being a study for study's sake or a study even necessarily for implementation, because like you mentioned, the state of Washington has already committed to, or has already developed a similar study. But how do we take that and then refine it to demonstrate the impacts to our state, to our people, and the citizens that live here, considering again the market size, the smaller number of people here, and the smaller purchasing power that we have as a state relative to other states.
Thanks. And then last question from me, I guess. You mentioned the impact to public or consumers, but I would point out, I guess, and I'm asking you this because there's no one from the counties who is here in person, but I presume something like this would save county dollars out of the county budget, which are taxpayer dollars, just on implementing, and being solely responsible for local recycling programs, which have been, challenging, especially for neighbor islands to keep running.
No, I don't want to speak for the counties, but at the same time, I think, we have to look at them differently. Obviously, how City and County of Honolulu approaches their waste is different than the neighbor islands. And so I think that, there are different concerns, but I think the overall benefit, should we get and implement EPR and be successful at it, I think that would have an impact in the costs that the counties bear with regards to waste management, solid waste management.
All right, thank you. Members, any other questions on this? Okay, all right, we will go ahead and move on. We'll still have a long agenda. Next up, we have House Bill 1102. This is prohibiting the intentional release of balloons. And first up, we have DLNR.
Aloha, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin, members of the committee, Brian Nielsen, Administrator, Division of Aquatic Resources. We stand on our written testimony in support and available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I also have listed for DLNR David Sakota. I'm not sure if he's also on the line. So we'll move on to Beach Environmental Awareness Campaign Hawaii, Dean Otsuki. Well, there
Aloha.
you go.
Yeah, aloha. Good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin, and committee members. My name is Dean Otsuki. I'm speaking on behalf of the Beach Environmental Awareness Campaign Hawaii, or BEACH. We strongly support HB 1102, which prohibits the intentional release of balloons inflated with gas that is lighter than the air. BEACH brings awareness and solutions to marine debris through environmental education, plastic reduction, litter prevention campaigns, and marine debris research. Basically, balloons are flying trash as they end up as pollution wherever they end up. They are a threat to marine and land animals because they're colorful and mistaken for food. More than 1,500 people have signed a petition in support of state action on marine debris, including balloon releases, and which I've included with my testimony. I've also included photos of a massive balloon release on Oahu, ironically on World Ocean Day, where over 2,000 balloons were released into the air. There are a lot better environmental friendly alternatives to celebrating, giving leis, flowers, planting a tree garden, just for some examples. Please pass HB 1102. And thank you for this opportunity to give testimony. Aloha.
Thank you. And then I also have Kayla Franklin. Are you here in person? All right. If not, we have about 4 other individuals in support, and then we did receive the petition with over 1,500 signatures, and then also Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition submitted testimony in support. With that, members, any questions? All right, we will move on to House Bill 1317 relating to environmental management. This is allowing public-private partnerships for development of wastewater treatment facilities. First up, we have Department of Taxation.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, member of the committee. Department of Taxation stands on its written testimony, providing comments available for question. Thank you.
Thank you. We have the Attorney General with comments. HGEA.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Michelle Kurihara-Klein on behalf of Randy Pereira, our Executive Director, and the Hawaii Government Employees Association. You have our written testimony on this measure. I apologize for its late submittal, but we stand in strong opposition to both the purpose and intent of this measure. I did want to highlight several key points from my written testimony just for edification for the committee's awareness and understanding. So first off, I do want to identify that this bill is clearly a repeat, a literal copy and paste repeat of the privatization in Maui. And however, it has much worse consequences than the Maui privatization because wastewater is a critical utility that every resident uses multiple times a day. And therefore, we raise very strong concerns. Additionally, this transfer or any transfer as outlined in the legislation could be done with no public notice, input, or consent. And this is wrong. This is bad public policy on all accounts. Secondly, we live in an island state with limited natural resources, and we need to incorporate emerging technologies. And we strongly support those specific provisions in the preamble. However, several local counties in Hawaii are already incorporating these technologies without relinquishing total control of their operations. So there are models that prove it can be done where counties can work with private entities in true partnership and not sell off their public assets. Third, I found it greatly offensive that the preamble suggested that your public workforce is a logistical and structural issue that needs to be surmounted. We strongly affirm that the local workforce has and will adapt when provided with resources, training, and support. So in other words, what we are saying is that the local workforce, the employees that are currently in those positions can be trained to be able to operate with new technologies. They just need to have training and support from their supervisors as well as government. And lastly, we are aware of other municipalities in Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Atlanta where water resources have been privatized with very, very negative consequences. Therefore, we respectfully urge the committee to defer action on House Bill 1317. And I would be available to answer any questions that any of the committee members have. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Wastewater Alternatives and Innovation, Stuart Coleman. Not present. So we have additional testimony from Maui County Council Chair Alice Lee in support, County of Hawaii in support, Ulupono Initiative in support, UPW in opposition, and another individual in opposition. Members, are there any questions? Rep. Tokioka.
All right, thank you, Chair. Sorry. Michelle? Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Thank
Good
you.
morning, Representative.
Good morning. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank
It's a
you.
little echoey, but I can make you out.
Okay. Shouldn't this be part of, shouldn't this be part of collective bargaining, Michelle? If
Well,
we go down this path?
sure. So, you know, as you recall, the legislature does have the authority to establish statute that would allow for the privatization of its public assets, as it had done in 2015 with the Maui Region Hawaii Health Systems Corporation, HHSC. So it's not necessarily a bargainable issue if the legislature expresses its intent to privatize. The after effects of what would happen to the employees does need to be negotiated and worked out. But as we saw with Maui, it was made clear that while the benefits that the government employees accrued up until the time of the transfer were honored, however, they were not able to maintain membership in the ERS or in the retirement system or the UTF, and there was a cleavage in government service.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you,
You're
Michelle.
welcome.
Any further questions, members? Rep. Purcell?
I have a quick question for, I think it's for Chair Lee. She's the chair of, no, not on.
She's not on the call, I don't
Okay.
think. Yeah.
Well, then I can ask HGEA about your sense of the situation. I know that in my district, wastewater has become very valuable because we're using the R1 water for agriculture. So I can see how private entities would be highly incentivized. But I'm wondering about losing that value, the state losing access to that valuable resource through public-private partnership. And I guess with the case of the Maui Health Corporation or the hospital, did the state lose access to public resources in that process as well, to your understanding?
Okay, so let me see if I understand your question. So with the HHSC transfer, did the state lose? So the state, so on Maui, or in the Maui County, all of the community hospitals, including Maui Memorial, are now privately operated by Kaiser, a subsidiary of Kaiser Permanente. And so the state, I believe via the legislative CIP process, as well as direct funding, does provide revenue resources for the Maui region. But I do not believe they have any direct oversight over the operations or the models of care at all. I think that there's a very, there is separation between the two. And the Maui region needs to petition to the legislature and request the funding, and it must be approved.
I think my question was more about profit. So that if that medical model were to become profitable, the state would not necessarily, they would not benefit from.
Okay, yeah, thank you. They will not, no. My understanding is that they do not. And I did want to, in the earlier comments that you were making, there are a number of types of P3s or public-private partnerships. So we are not in opposition, in a blanket opposition to all P3s. We would support private financing to benefit the public good, or even instances where there is a design build for a new technology. So I know that this measure outlines a number of resource recovery type solid waste reprocessing, which, as a layperson, there is so if we really think about what they're saying, it's very interesting, I would say, about solid waste being reprocessed into new products, as well as what you had indicated about, water being recycled and being used for agricultural purposes. So we would not oppose any of those new technologies, but we do want to ensure that the committee understands that there is a lot of talent within government, and these employees can be trained to, to incorporate the new technologies. So it could be a privately designed build and then handed back over to government to continue to run and function it. And we would be in strong support of that. And, I think oftentimes, as I outlined in my testimony, or we outlined in our testimony, that oftentimes there is a concept where new technology and government are mutually exclusive, and government is, too big of a behemoth. They don't change. It's too slow to change. But I think that we have to move away from that generic saying and do better. And I think that all of us are willing to do better, especially in light of a full privatization where a private company is owning and running our resources.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Rep. Moriyoshi has a question.
Is the AG's office here?
I don't think they were.
Okay. HGA, did you review the AG's or actually, is there anyone who we have any attorney organization here? Guess not. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's not anyone from the Hawaii County who proposed this bill here to answer some of the questions I have as well. So yeah, we recognize this is a really messy bill. But we'll go ahead and move on for now, unless there's any further questions. Okay. Next up, we have House Bill 1319 relating to carbon pricing. First up, we have Department of Taxation.
Aloha Chairs, Vice Chair, Member of the Committee, Titin Sakata on behalf of Department of Taxation. We stand on our written testimony, providing comments available for question. Thank you.
Thank you. And then DLNR Dobor.
Mahalo, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin, and committee members. Megan Statz, Assistant Administrator for the Division of Boating and Ocean Recreation. We stand on our written testimony in support of the language being proposed pertaining to the Boating Special Fund. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Hawaii State Energy Office.
Aloha, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. We stand on our comments, our written testimony, and would just like to add that we are in receipt of the draft final carbon tax study from University of Hawaii. We just received it yesterday, and we're doing our due diligence review of it now and trying to aim to get it out to the public in the near future. Thank you.
Climate Commission, Anu Hiddle. In support, Tax Foundation. With comments, Hawaii Food Industry Association. In opposition, Life of the Land.
Aloha, committee members and chair. Henry Curtis with Life of the Land. We note that we have a choice right now. We can either rapidly move towards renewable energy, or we can focus on extracting fossil fuels and taxing them. We favor the first over the second approach. Carbon taxes are opposed by many climate justice and environmental justice organizations and alliances. It is supported by some mainstream environmental groups and economists. We note there are several issues. One of them deals with equity, which this bill attempts to deal with. Another deals with geography, that communities, for example, from Waianae coming into town or Hilo going to the Kona coast are historically located in one place and would be heavily impacted by this. We note that there is national data that indicates how carbon taxes impact different communities, but there is no Hawaii data. So we would be flying blind on that for now. We also note that carbon taxes globally, there are a lot of industry finance studies or big mainstream finance studies that indicate how great it is, but it has only reduced the increased rate of greenhouse gas emissions in most places that has been tried, unless it's been at $100 a ton or more. And so a real bill would set $100 a ton or more and deal with geographic disparities. Mahalo.
Thank you, Imua Alliance. I don't see anyone present. Ulupono Initiative.
Good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin, and members of the committee. My name is Micah Munikata here on behalf of the Ulupono Initiative. We'd like to stand on our written testimony supporting the intent. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Faith Action Environmental Justice Task Force.
Aloha, Chair. Matt Geyer from the Faith Action Environmental Justice Task Force. I'd like to thank the committee for all your work addressing all these environmental issues. And the Environmental Justice Task Force supports this bill. It is a really fantastic attempt to address our reliance on fossil fuels. We would like to ask you to improve it by giving more money back to the people. Our assessment of this bill as it stands is that there would be some impact on all from lower all the way up income wise, where people would be spending more money than they would receive from the tax credit. And if you were to increase that, especially if you were able to give back all the revenue from this program to residents of Hawaii, we find that we have studies that show that in Hawaii, every income group all the way up until you get up to the wealthiest would benefit from receiving all the revenue back from this program in equal shares. So, but once again, really appreciate all the work that this committee is doing. And thank you for allowing me to testify. Aloha.
Thank you. Then we have Blue Planet Foundation.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Blue Planet Foundation supports House Bill 1319, pricing carbon finally in Hawaii. Currently, the prices of electricity, gasoline, and other fuels reflect little or none of the long-term costs of climate change or the near-term health of burning those fossil fuels. And this really creates a market failure, which suppresses incentives to develop or deploy carbon-reducing measures such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, low-carbon fuels, and the like. So taxing these fossil fuels will really infuse this cost across the supply chain and really help shape behavior while it raises revenue for the state. So we see this as a wise approach to help us achieve our decarbonization goals. In our written testimony, we kind of highlight five areas, and I won't go over won't go over all of them, but just want to touch briefly on the fact that this is a perfect time to use the suppressed price of oil to raise money to make up the shortfall in the state budget and provide some relief to local residents. This bill does this through a refundable tax credit. There might be other ways to do it, like through the earned income tax credit or other reducing focused taxes on those who would be impacted the most. We know from other jurisdictions that carbon pricing has proven successful in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We again look to British Columbia for a successful model. And in their case, they've actually raised the tax to over $30 per metric ton, and it was supported by the business community. This is after it was in place for a number of years. So interesting results in British Columbia. They also saw a reduction in carbon emissions. We also think this measure would help position Hawaii as a leader. No states have adopted full carbon taxes or pricing carbon like this would. And just like Hawaii's 100% clean energy law, we see this as sort of the breaking the ice in providing an example for the rest of the country of what this may look like. We'd be happy to work with the committee and the legislature on refining the mechanism to reduce the regressive nature of this carbon pricing. But overall, we're supportive of House Bill 1319 as a bold step forward. Thanks for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And then we have Hawaii Auto Dealers Association.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chairs, and members of the committee. I'm David Rolfe with the Hawaii Auto Dealers Association. It's good that I can follow Jeff at Blue Planet here because we find ourselves generally in support of the things that Jeff has mentioned. The carbon pricing that he's talking about in Canada was successful, and that's why we've supported things like this instead of things that didn't work, like the other type of tax that they tried in Canada. But our dealers believe that this bill has merits for advancing more rapidly the desired renewable energy transition while providing significant revenues that would be gathered from a wide variety of sectors. And that could be used to offset, for one thing, the unemployment costs that businesses are going to be taxed because of the COVID recession. Many in Hawaii won't initially like this bill because it proposes a tax. It's a barrel tax, however, that would apply to all entities that use fossil fuel, diesel buses, electric utility, gasoline users, natural gas users, and others. For gasoline on the wholesale barrel, it'd be 20 cents on the gallon starting off in 2022, 31 cents in 26, 43 cents in 29, and in 2036, it'd be 55 cents a gallon. Interestingly enough, some of the national leaders in the auto industry, including Bob Lutz, who had called for a higher gas tax years ago, and AutoNation, Michael Jackson, CEO, he is the CEO of the largest auto retailer in America. And he supported a 10 cents years ago, a 10 cent a gallon increase, open-ended, increasing up to what he thought at the time I mentioned was $6 a gallon in Europe. It does include for lower and moderate income individuals some offsets to help address their monthly budgets. We just thought this was one of the most well-crafted bills that we have seen. And while we just offered comments here because we haven't had a chance to talk to stakeholders in the industry before we submitted supportive testimony, we have generally been supportive of this whole idea and compliment the drafters of this bill. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. It has tremendous, tremendous possibilities.
Thank you. And next we have Sierra Club with comments.
Aloha, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin, and members of the Environmental Committee. Thank you very much for hearing this bill. We are very pleased that the committee is continuing this conversation on setting a local price on carbon. However, I'd like to urge you to hold the bill. Extensive conversation is still needed. So as we noted in our testimony, the study that the State Energy Office referenced has not been released to the public. And that really is, I think, step one in advancing this conversation. In addition, we need to do a lot. All of us advocates, as well as lawmakers, to really engage with constituents and make sure that we fully understand the implications of this bill. As Mr. Rolfe noted, it will raise the prices on a lot of things, possibly everything. And we need to make sure that we are fully thought those out and can anticipate and prevent unintended consequences. The Sierra Club has been engaging on this issue throughout the US and in Canada. We have a lot of opinions on this, and we are committed to helping the legislature to craft a really good bill that really not only can get adopted, but can be sustained. We see this as one tool among many, and we want to make sure that we engage all of those tools to address the climate crisis. One thing I wanted to add to our testimony, just to sensitize you all to this, I think it's really important for us to double down on the 2045 deadline for clean energy adoption. We do not want to see a situation where We have carbon emissions and money collected from carbon emissions to become a reliable source of funding for state government, or even a reliable source of funding for households. So, while we want to use a carbon price as a way to help influence people's behavior, we need to make sure we have clean energy investment to make sure that they have those options to change their behavior. And then we also need to make sure that we don't let this become just a background funding source, and instead we actually commit to abandoning carbon emissions altogether. We are happy to help in any ways that we can. And in my testimony, I highlighted a few sources of information, and I'm happy to continue to engage with lawmakers on this issue. Thank you very, very much. I agree.
Thank you. And then we have John Kawamoto signed up to submit testimony.
Aloha.
Riley. Oh, go ahead.
My name is John Kawamoto. I support HB 1319 with amendments. The increase in the carbon tax is praiseworthy. However, all of the increased tax revenue should be rebated to Hawaii residents in equal shares. Climate change is the greatest market failure in human history, largely because the fossil fuel industry does not pay for the costs, the impacts that greenhouse gas emissions have on the environment and on people. The carbon tax is a market intervention mechanism that has been proven to be effective in reducing greenhouse gas emissions by reducing the use of fossil fuels. And the carbon tax aspect of the bill is worthy of implementation. The bill creates refundable tax credits to mitigate the adverse financial effects of the carbon tax. However, for most of those who qualify for the tax credits, the credits may not be enough to cover their increased tax burden. The tax credits are static, so the gap increases as the tax increases. Instead, for equity's sake, all of the increased tax revenue should be refunded to Hawaii residents through equal lump sum rebates. The majority of people would benefit financially because their rebate would be larger than their tax burden. Low-income households would benefit the most. With this amendment, the bill would be consistent with a carbon fee and dividend concept endorsed by more than 3,500 US economists, including 45 Nobel laureates in economics and 4 former chairs of the Federal Reserve. Mahalo for your kind attention.
Thank you. And just want to take a moment to remind everyone to please try to stick to the 2 to 3 minute testimony limit. We do have 6 additional bills on the agenda after this one. So next up, we have Ronald Riley signed up to submit testimony.
Thank you, Chair Lowen. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight 2 points in my written testimony. One, given the urgency of the climate crisis, I agree with all the supportive comments that have been raised. I would just suggest that the increase in this tax be greater than what is proposed. And my comment would be that the tax should be increased, the price should be increased by at least $10 each year. And I might refer to Canada, that's just recently increased its yearly increase from $10 to $15 per year, and will move up to $170 per ton of emissions by 2030. This bill could do the same. The other point that I would like to make is that a single mom dealing with housing costs, food costs, utility costs, transportation costs, and possibly healthcare expenses has got a monthly, payment crunch. And I think a tax rebate is not an effective way to help such a person. And I would suggest that all the revenue be returned in the form of a monthly check or debit card or direct bank ETF deposit, so that the monthly economic crunch on low-income and vulnerable families be addressed. So thank you very much for this discussion.
Thank you. And then we have Paul Bernstein. And Susan.
Hello, thank you. Thank you,
ahead.
Chair Mullen and members of the committee for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to just call attention to the issue about the costs, that recognize that any environmental policy that's going to cause change in behavior will raise costs. But putting a price on carbon is the most economically efficient and most cost-effective way to bring about emission reductions. So I greatly appreciate this bill's intent to raise the price on fossil fuels while doing it in a progressive manner by giving revenues back to households. I agree with others that more of the money needs to be given back to households to make the lower income folks whole. One other thing I want to point out with the bill, that I believe the barrel tax rates that are in your schedule are incorrect. A $40 per metric ton on CO2 in 2022 should be $14.94 a barrel for gasoline rather than the $8.22 that you have. And diesel should be $17.07 per barrel rather than $10.35. I'd be happy to share the calculations with you if you'd like, but thank you for your time.
Thank you. And then we have Susan Gorman-Chang signed up to testify in person.
Yes, aloha. I'm Susan Gorman-Chang, and thank you, Chair Lowen and Vice Chair Martin and members of the committee for hearing House Bill 1319. Mahalo for taking this important step for Hawaii in mitigating climate change. A carbon tax will have the effect of increasing fossil fuel prices, which will shift people away from using fossil fuel. Statistics from the Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism Hawaii reveal that when gas prices increased to nearly $5 a gallon here in 2011 and 2012, that bus ridership also increased by the same trajectory. Thus, price can drive consumer behavior. I'm in favor of HB 1319, but I would like the tax credit amount to increase each year as the carbon tax does, and the entire amount of carbon tax be returned to Hawaii residents. Better yet, a direct payment in the same year fossil fuel interests will probably pass the costs onto consumers would be good, because it would allow households to offset these costs immediately rather than waiting until they file their tax return in the following year. Again, mahalo for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And that is all the people we have signed up for in-person testimony. We do have quite a number of additional testimonies, mostly in support, a handful in opposition. Members, are there any questions? Brett Martin.
I have a question for the Department of Taxation. In your testimony, you have two issues that I wanted to get a little more color on. One is that you had recommended that the tax not be refundable to prevent fraud. How would that play out in terms of giving money back to those who need it most?
Oh, Rep. Martin, it's just a matter of our policy that the department prefers that any tax credits be non-refundable, so it will be used against their tax liability to, as we say, to prevent fraud. As we've seen with any refundable credit, there are higher likelihood of fraud because you don't have to have a Hawaii income tax liability to claim the credit. Therefore, that's our preference. It's the non-refundable credits.
I see. So it would not address the goal of returning some of the tax to the neediest members. My second question is, I guess there's a legal issue about who we define as the recipients, if they can be resident or any Hawaii taxpayer. If it were to be any Hawaii taxpayer, not limited to residents, what are the implications of that? What types of people would be getting this tax refund? And would they be getting more than they actually pay into our state?
Well, as with any tax credit, you have to file Hawaii income tax to claim the credits. So anybody with Hawaii income tax liability, or if they have any withholding on their taxes on their income tax, then they'll file Hawaii income tax, and that's the only way to claim the credit is to file the Hawaii income tax. And the credit amount right now, it's a set amount based on the income limit that we suggest will be based on the federal adjusted gross income. So yes, it will be everybody under, for example, a single taxpayer with the adjusted gross income under 75,000, they would receive $150. Right now, that's the bill is just set amount. It doesn't. So it's not like a progressive amount where if you make 10,000, you get more, or 20,000, you get a little bit less. It's right now, everybody that makes under 75,000 would get $150.
So do you think there are many non-Hawaii residents who pay tax here and meet that income requirement that would end up getting tax credits from our state?
The tax credit, it's available for all Hawaii, whoever file Hawaii income tax. Yes.
Yes, but would there be many people who are not residents but meet those income standards that actually are filing taxes in our state and would be eligible for the credit? Do you have any idea if those numbers are very small or not? I'm guessing there are very few people that would meet that, but I don't know.
Yeah, we don't have that many non-resident that file Hawaii income tax. And if you're looking at the total population of income tax filer, of course, majority is a resident. There's some non-residents that file Hawaii income tax because they have income earned in Hawaii. They come here for, it could be a few months or for a project. So they have Hawaii income tax that's withheld or income that's subject to income tax in Hawaii, but they're non-residents. So, if you look at the total population of Hawaii income taxpayer, majority is resident. That's why we prefer that it's a non-refundable credit. So you can only use against your Hawaii income tax liability. If you don't have Hawaii income tax liability, then you won't be able to use the credit if it's a non-refundable credit.
Further questions? Okay, Rep. Mariyoshi.
For DOE tax again, I'm a little concerned that this tax is going to disproportionately affect those individuals living farthest away from where they work, the rural areas and such. You did mention, I believe in your testimony that, well, I'm just kind of wondering, with the tax structure and the reimbursement structure the way it is, do you think it's going to be impacting those living farther away with maybe less fuel efficient cars rather than those living close to town that can afford electric cars? Yeah. I know this is just transportation, but I'd just like your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's right now, as I mentioned, the credit is just a flat amount. It's not, it doesn't, it's just based on income. So it's not, that's just how it is. So it doesn't matter where you live. It's just based on your income limit, and the credit amount is based on the income limit. And yes, and taxes, you only get it when you file your income tax. So it's only once a year.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Rep. Hashem.
DOE tax, did you price this out?
Unfortunately, we don't have a estimate for this bill yet, Representative Hassan, but when it goes to the money committee, we'll make sure to include any estimates that we have. Thank you.
Any further questions? I have a couple questions for DOE tax also. And I think we did get some estimates from Seth for this version, but then if we change it, of course, it won't apply anymore. So just in looking at this, I think to make this not have a negative impact on lower income families, I think that we probably have to increase the amount that goes back to families. But in thinking about it, it makes more sense to do it as a percentage because the tax will increase over time. But in addition, because we hope that the amount of fossil fuel that we're taxing decreases, there'll be that balance where it could, we also hope on the the far out end of this that it reduces to essentially zero. So it would make more sense to look at the pool of revenue, maybe do like an 80-20 or 75-25 split, and then take that 80% of the revenues, divide it into equal shares, and return that back in the form of a tax credit or dividend. So I guess the question from me to you is, how much more challenging would a program like that be for DOTAX to administer? And that's the first part. And the second part is, there's a lot of talk about doing a direct dividend where you would just automatically mail checks out to Hawaii residents. I assume that would probably still need to be administered by DOTAX, right? I mean, we would have no way of knowing who or where to mail checks through for the most part, other than looking at who filed taxes. Does that sound, what do you think?
Chair Lowen, two-part question. The first question, if it's based on revenue, as you say, however the split is, it will be very difficult for Department of Taxation to administer the tax credit, because usually tax credit is set in the statute, and we wouldn't know how to distribute this money. With the tax credit, you spell out the amount of the credit that you want to give out, and if you want to address inflation, it could be written in the bill that every year the credit amount could increase according to inflation, or you could set it in the statute that it would increase when the barrel tax increase as well. And for the second part, for DOTAX to mail out the check on a monthly basis, I don't think we have any program or the capacity to do that.
I would say monthly, just annually.
Annually, so it will be similar as when you have to file your taxes, and that's how you get your tax credit, or it's just like getting your tax refund is when you file your income tax credit. So it's done annually.
So it would be more straightforward for DOTAX to administer this as a tax credit than as a dividend program.
The Department of Taxation, we don't have a dividend program that we administer. We're just administering the taxes, and it's only through the tax credits that we have that you could a taxpayer could get a refund or a check out of the Department of Taxation. So we don't have any dividend program for the state that we administer.
But if we created one in this bill, you might, because I imagine it would be DOTAX that would administer it, similar to how our stimulus checks got mailed or direct deposited. That was IRS handling it and looking at who, what addresses and who had paid taxes, and that's kind of how they would determine who it would be distributed to. Wouldn't it in a way be easier to have a dividend where you just directly divided equal shares of a pool of funding up and sent it out, or would you think it would be easier to administer a tax credit?
When you say divided in equal share, is to everybody? Is there an income limit, or how do you set it?
That would all be, I guess that would depend on what we put in the bill, but say there's an income limit, but you took 80% of the revenues of the tax and divided into equal shares and distributed that.
I think we'll probably have to work. We'll probably have to work with you on the language, because it has to be very clear on who who gets what, and like you say, there's income limit, and the different people get different amount. I'm assuming that based on your income, and also you also have the child that qualifying child that get a separate amount from the taxpayer itself. So it will have to be, it's like the federal stimulus check. It's very specific. It's spelled out in the
I guess
bill.
what we're trying to do is figure out the best system to redistribute revenues back to Hawaii's families so that we're not having a regressive impact, so that everybody gets back at least what they paid in, but probably more. And there would still be additional revenues remaining that could be used for programs that benefit the environment, or potentially some portion to general fund. Right now, as we're trying to plug holes in the budget, that's been on the table as well. So I guess the question is for that tax credit back piece. It could be a tax credit, it could be a dividend. There's been discussion of just increasing things like the earned income tax credit or making that refundable. And we're just trying to figure out what's the most straightforward way, in DOTAX's opinion, of minimizing the burden on your department to administer it. So maybe we can continue the discussion further after offline.
Yes, definitely. Chair Lohan, and of course the simplest for us, it's if you can piggyback on the current credit too. As you know, we have the refund. We have the food excise tax credits that's meant to give people back on what the GT that they pay on food, and it's on a sliding scale. It depends on the person's adjusted gross income. So the least that you make, the more money you get back. So we definitely could work with you on the tax credit program.
Right, and then we're also just trying to balance it so that whatever the tax credit is that's going out doesn't exceed the revenue from the actual tax, because the revenue amount from the tax increases over time. But if the volume of what's being taxed decreases, then we're not really sure what direction it'll go and how quickly. So we want to build in some kind of link of the revenue amount to the tax credit amount, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, members, any other questions? Okay, we will move on. Thank you to House Bill 1350 relating to the environment. This is requiring the development of an environmental justice tool. And first up, we have Department of Health, OEQC. Oops, sorry, they did not submit testimony, not asked for in person. First up, we have Sierra Club.
Good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin, members of the committee. Jody Malinowski on behalf of the Sierra Club in strong support of this bill. Just wanted to start by extending a mahalo to Vice Chair Martin and Rep. Lowen for hearing this. This is a really exciting measure. We haven't really seen too many bills to specifically address environmental justice concerns, so we're really excited by this measure. We believe, of course, that every Hawaii resident, regardless of race or income, has a right to clean air, clean water, in a safe, healthy community. We think that this mapping tool is a great first step to accomplish this and really bridge the divide between some of the social justice and environmental concerns that we have throughout Hawaii. We do have a couple of friendly recommendations that we included in our testimony. The first is acknowledging some of the staffing and budgetary concerns this year. The committee could look at what existing mapping tools there are nationally. The US EPA does have a national EJ mapping tool that might provide a baseline to analyze what data gaps there are in Hawaii, should the committee decide to do a similar tool specific to Hawaii. And then the second recommendation we have is to really actively encourage public participation in the creation of this tool. We believe that for this tool to be widely accepted, particularly by communities that have been in the past marginalized or oppressed, that meaningful community engagement and discussion needs to happen throughout the process, not just after the tool is created. So we do acknowledge that this bill does include some stakeholder engagement, but maybe explicitly creating or calling out something like a community-led advisory council or some way for the community really to feel empowered and able to provide input and recommendations prior to the tool being released is really important to kind of build that framework for outreach and engagement. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support.
Thank you. And that's all the in-person testimony we have indicated. Members, any questions? All right, if not, next up we have House Bill 1318 relating to sustainability. And first up we have Office of Planning.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Danielle Bass. I'm the State of Hawaii Sustainability Coordinator, here representing the Office of Planning in our testimony today. Thank you for hearing HB 1318. The Office of Planning does support the intent of this measure. We offer comments. We understand that the introduction of HB 1318 is in conjunction with House Bill 1149. In an effort to consolidate various government land use and environmental policy functions of different agencies into a new structure under the Office of Planning. In our testimony, we have provided a proposed HD1 for your committee's consideration. I have summarized that in our one-page testimony, in which we would prefer to add some preamble language to explain the conjunction of both bills, as well as we would rather apply the environmental review to be transferred from the Office of Environmental Quality Control to be transferred on the entire Office of Planning instead of a Sustainability and Environmental Review division. I'm available for any comments, or I'm available for any questions, and thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And then we have Ona Theone and with comments. Are you on the call?
Yes, thank you, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin, for hearing this bill. Ona Theone, I'm Chair of the Environmental Council. I did submit comments and generally support the intent of this bill. I'll go ahead and stand on my written comments, and if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. And that is all the people we have signed up for in-person testimony. Members, any questions? Great. If not, we'll move on to House Bill 842 relating to environmental impact statements. And we have, again, Ona Theone, I think I've been saying it wrong.
Yes, Theone, correct. Yes, thank you again, Chair Lowen. You know, again, the Environmental Council went ahead and submitted comments on this bill. This is a similar bill that we submitted comments on last year. I just want to note that with the exception of allowing for online commenting of EAs and EISs, the Office of Environmental Quality Control already does all of the items that are listed in this bill. The other note that I did want to make is, you know, the preamble language to this bill notes that the council accepts EAs and EISs, which we do not do. We are not an accepting authority. So would ask that that be taken out in any future drafts. And again, I'm available for questions if you have any. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that is all the people we have signed up to testify in person. Members, any questions? Great. If not, we'll move on to House Bill 901 relating to environmental impact statements. First up, we have Office of Planning.
Hi, aloha, Chair. Rodney Funakoshi from the State Office of Planning. OP stands in strong support of this measure. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And then we also have Life of the Land. Henry Curtis.
Hi there. My video has stopped. But in general, the Ag District, it allows for, hi there. The Ag District allows for all kinds of different kinds of projects to be built on it. And those that are built without government money are exempt from Chapter 343, the EIS law. The only trigger is when they intersect with a road or a public project, which is secondary to the project. So this bill would in fact kill EISs for a lot of major projects. There was one in North Kohala that reached the Supreme Court where a major resort needed an EIS because of the intersection with the road. And therefore, passing this bill would stop EISs for some really important projects.
All right, thank you. My vice chair is going to take over for a brief moment.
All right. Members, any questions for the testifiers? All right, hearing none, we're going to move on to HB 557, which relating to the employees' retirement system requires employees' retirement system to reevaluate its investments in coal, oil, natural gas, and other fossil fuel companies over the next 5 years, divest of holdings. First up, we have here testifier Thomas Williams in opposition. Are you here, Thomas? Is he in the room? Please go ahead, Thomas, if you're able to.
Yes, thank you, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin, and members of the Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection. I'm Thomas Williams, the Executive Director of the Employees Retirement System, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to testify this morning in strong opposition to House Bill 557. You, of course, have our written testimony, and I'll attempt here to just supplement it ever so briefly. We are opposed to this particular bill, and we've seen versions of it over the last 3, 4, 5 years. In large measure because we view it as increasing the risk to our plan. It likely reduces the plan's effective investment return, and it jeopardizes the long-term sustainability of our program. You know, what's challenging here is that we agree with the bill's characterization of the kind of risk to the environment and to the economies that are posed by climate change, global warming, CO2 emissions, sea level rise, and the like. But we don't agree with the presumed or prescribed resolution or solution, and that is divestment. We think divestment is wholly ineffective and inappropriate for our program. We know that a large number of public institutions, significantly public retirement plans, have considered divestment and rejected it. Divestment is viewed as a one-size-fits-all solution. As I mentioned a moment ago, we've seen about 3, 4, 5 of these divestment bills all seem to suggest divestment over a period of 5 years with 20% per year on average. And it doesn't take into consideration the unique circumstances impacting each of the individual plans. The funding levels of these programs, contribution levels, the unfunded liabilities that exist in these plans, all relate to the flexibility that they may have or not to employ different methods to address the unique challenges posed by climate risk. Divestment is certainly an alluring solution, but it's been ineffectual, at least from the research done by a large number of credible organizations and from our very own research. I think it's important to recognize that ERS is a public pension trust, and it's different than a lot of the programs and plans that are mentioned in the bill. There are a lot of plans that are alluded to that are sovereign wealth funds. Some are college and university plans, but we are a public pension plan governed by the rules of the Internal Revenue Service. And as such, we have to invest our plan's assets solely in the best interest of our members. Now, of course, the bill might suggest that it would be in our members' best interest were we to divest fully of fossil fuels. We don't agree. The bill suggests that
I'm done with the oral testimony.
Henry, can you mute yourself, please?
Sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Williams, please continue.
Chair, shall I continue with my testimony or?
Please do. Sorry about that.
All righty. I was just suggesting that we have the fiduciary responsibility, and it's unquestioned, to invest in the best interest of our members and beneficiaries. We have to optimize returns for our membership. We can engage in environmental, social, and other considerations to the extent that they don't impact negatively the first objective. The reporting requirements additionally that are outlined in the bill, I think, would be onerous and difficult to comply with, especially considering the investment resources we have, and would distract from our investment responsibilities. When I mentioned funding level, you know, the plans, one of the plans that's mentioned in the testimony is 110% funded. We're 55.2% funded, within the lowest 20% of plans in the nation. We are a mature plan. We have $14.6 billion in unfunded liability. We can't afford the risk that divestment would pose to our plan. The bill says some very compelling things about the organizations that have divested, but interestingly, and I don't expect it to identify those organizations that have addressed this issue and elected not to do so. There are over 2,800 organizations made up of all the major public pension plans, CalSTRS, CalPERS, and the major colleges and universities have reviewed this issue and elected not to divest because they view it as ineffectual for achieving the climate goals. It is not effective in changing corporate behavior. And this assemblage of institutions, part of the Principles for Responsible Investment organization, of which we are a member since 2018, represents over $86 trillion in investments. More importantly, and in conclusion, we really think the bill is unnecessary because we have been lowering our exposure to energy investments voluntarily. We've had an ESG policy for well over a decade. Attached to our testimony is a chart that illustrates the decline in investments in energy reflective of all of the classifications that are outlined in the bill from 2017 through the present, through the end of 2020. We went from about $117 billion invested to now under 1%. We have 17/100ths of 1% of our assets invested in energy. We think this bill is driven understandably by people who have their primary interest is in mitigating global warming. Our primary interest is in the protection of the plan. We would ask that the committee defer this bill and leave the investment decision-making of the ERS assets to its professional investment staff and its trustees. And I thank you for the opportunity to testify, and will be available for questions should you have them.
Thank you. Just reminding everyone again, we're trying to ask testifiers to keep their testimony to no more than 3 minutes. Next up, we have Climate Protectors Coalition.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair and members of the committee. I'm glad to follow Mr. Williams with a different point of view. I think this bill's point is to recognize increasing fossil fuel risks in the time of the climate crisis and to seek to minimize investment risks. This bill, different from past years, the bills that Mr. Williams referred to, attempts to minimize any losses for the ERS by including flexibility and gradual divestment rather than fixed benchmarks. He also encouraged companies to move away from fossil fuels by exempting companies with greater clean energy than fossil fuel investments, or with a clear path to divest by 2030, which would indicate, I think, that they have less risk of financial losses as fossil fuels become increasingly disfavored. So we share the desire of the fund to protect its assets. We recognize its fiduciary responsibility, but we think it's clear in this time that we should move on and move away from fossil fuels, and we strongly support this bill. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And then we have Matthew Geyer, individual in support.
Aloha, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to testify again. I'd like to reflect on the thought that there is a impact on the funds from this measure. And that's kind of consistent across all these bills that we look at. Is people say they want to help the environment, but when it comes down to there's going to be an impact on their operations or their life in some way, then they're not willing to make a change. And that, I mean, I've spoken to almost every environmentalist that it feels like there is on the island. And without exception, we're all concerned about the impacts of climate change and the impacts that changing will have on lower income families and working class families. But climate change is coming. We need to make all these different changes and we need to be mindful of their impacts, but we can't say we can't do them because there's going to be an impact on how business currently works. So once again, thank you for allowing me to testify and thank you for considering these important environmental bills.
Thank you. That is all the people we have signed up for in-person testimony. Members, any questions? All right, if not, we'll move on to the last bill on our agenda, House Bill 410 relating to tree planting. And first up, we have University of Hawaii, Deborah Halbert.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Deborah Halbert, Associate Vice President for Academic Programs and Planning for the University of Hawaii System. We stand on testimony, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. And Terry Ushijima, individual.
Good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin, and members of the committee. I'm Terry Ushijima, Interim Assistant Superintendent with the Department of Education, testifying on behalf of Superintendent Christina Kishimoto. The department stands on our written testimony and provide comments to House Bill 410. We agree that it is critical for youth to cultivate environmental understanding in the areas described in the bill. While planting trees is one such approach, the target rate of planting trees in the bill would mean planting 840,000 trees a year. The logistics and space for tree planting at such a rate would need to be considered. Schools are empowered to creatively take standards-aligned curricular approaches that promote environmental protection, biodiversity, and climate change mitigation. Discussions regarding how the department can increase sustainability practices are already in motion, such as replacing invasive plants and allowing for cultural teaching through ceremonial or food gardens. The department is committed to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and is contributing to the Hawaii 2050 Sustainability Plan. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm available to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have DLNR, Josh Atwood.
Hi, good morning, members of the committee. Josh Atwood for DLNR. I'm here to tell you that we submitted testimony in opposition in error. That was a user error on my end when submitting, signing up for the hearing. And so we are working on comments related to this measure. We are, without having those comments ready for this hearing, I can say that the department is obviously recognizing the value of tree planting, but is working on some suggestions about how to improve the measure. But at this time, I just want to let you know that our opposition testimony is an error and we're working on comments for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, we have Matthew Geyer, Faith Action, Economic Justice Task Force.
Hello, Chair. Just wanted to quickly say we really think planting trees is a big part of the solution, and it's great that you're considering legislation to increase the amount of trees planted. We need to do everything we can, from the existing programs we have to benefit the environment, to thinking up new programs, to bolstering existing programs. So from carbon cashback to planting trees, we need to do it all. Thank you again for all your hard work on these environmental issues.
Thank you. That is all the people we have signed up for in-person testimony. Members, are there any questions? All right, if not, we will recess for decision-making. environmental protection. For decision-making, first on our agenda, we have House Bill 1333, Clean Energy Product Recycling. We're going to defect the date on this to July 1st, 2050 and make some technical amendments. This needs an appropriation. We're going to leave that blank for now and move this forward. Members, any comments? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Thank you. Chair votes for HB 1333 pass with amendments. Vice Chair votes aye. Rep Hashem? Rep Matayoshi? Rep Peruso? Rep Todd? Rep Tokioka? Rep Matsumoto?
Aye.
Measure passes.
And next we have House Bill 1290. This is relating to wheeling, intragovernmental wheeling. So we're going to clarify that the commission can implement this either by rule or by commission order. Defect the date to July 1st, 2050 and move this forward for further discussion. Members, any comments? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Chair recommends pass with amendments. Vice Chair votes aye. Seeing all members are present, any noes or reservations? Noted reservation from Rep Tokioka, and measure passes.
All right, House Bill 803. This is allowing counties to enforce installment of EV chargers in public lots. So that we're going to fill in the blank date on page 2 to be January 1st, 2022. We're going to use the term network capable instead of capable of being connected to the internet, just for clarification. We'll clarify that chargers must be kept in working order. So just kind of extraneous language to say reasonable effort to keep in working order. That would be something I guess a judge could decide. And then we're going to increase the requirement from 1 spot per 100 to 5 per 100. Make technical amendments and defect the date to July 1st, 2050 and move this forward for further consideration. Members, any comments? All right, if not, Vice Chair.
Thank you. HB 803, Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Members, any noes or reservations? Hearing none, measure passes.
All right, House Bill 1142. This is the surcharge on sale of new vehicles to fund the EV charging infrastructure program. We're going to take the recommendation of DOTAX to delete subsection D on pages 4 and 5. We're going to defect the date to July 1st, 2050, but note in the committee report, the effective date should be no earlier than January 1st, 2022 to allow DOTAX time to administratively adjust. And also we'll note in the committee report that the ceiling of the PUC special fund will need to be adjusted to allow for this expenditure. And then we'll also include a cross-reference to the new EV infrastructure incentive surcharge to the PUC special fund, and then technical amendments. So members, any comments or questions? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote. Oh, Rep Matayoshi.
Sorry, I just wanted to briefly just comment on my line of questioning. I think this is has the potential of disproportionately impacting lower income communities and our neighbor island communities as well. And I think that the surcharge should probably be applied to higher end EV vehicles as well, since they're going to be the ones benefiting from it. But with that, I'll be voting with reservations.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Okay, Chair recommends passing HB 1142 with amendments. Chair, Vice Chair vote aye. Rep Matayoshi voting with reservations. Any more reservations or no's? No. Rep Tokioka
Reservations, please.
Voting no. And Rep Matsumoto voting with reservations.
Reservations for reservation.
Thank you. House Bill 1140. This is EV parking requirements for new construction. So we're going to adopt the recommendations from Tesla's testimony about specifying the kilowatt hours per parking stall instead of, or the kilowatts per parking stall instead of kilowatt hours total. and adjust the definition of EV ready. And they also pointed out some typos. And then we'll defect the date to July 1st, 2050, move this forward for further discussion. Members, any comments? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Chair and Vice Chair vote aye to pass with amendments. Any reservations or noes? Rep. Tokioka, reservations. Hearing no more, measure adopted.
Thank you. House Bill 550, this is energy efficiency for state facilities. We're going to adopt the suggested amendments of Hawaii State Energy Office, which mirror the recommendations also in DAG's testimony. And we'll add a small new section in Chapter 196 to establish a goal to achieve at least a 25% reduction in electricity consumptions of state facilities using 2005 as the baseline year, which is consistent with the Paris Agreement commitment that Hawaii has made. And then we'll defect the date to July 1st, 2050. Members, any comments? If not, Vice Chair.
For Bill HB 550, Chair recommends passing with amendments. Chair, Vice Chair vote aye. Any noes or reservations? Hearing none, measure passes.
For House Bill 1316, we're going to defer decision-making to Thursday, February 11th, at the end of our 9 a.m. agenda. And House Bill 1102, this is intentional release of balloons. We're going to make some technical amendments and defect the date to July 1st, 2050. Members, any comments? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Chair recommends HB 1102 pass with amendments. Chair, Vice Chair vote aye. Any reservations or noes? Hearing none, measure passes.
Thank you. House Bill 1317, we're going to defer this also to Thursday, 2/11, end of agenda. See if we can get someone on the phone from Hawaii County to talk to you if there's a way to fix this. Just needs a little more work. And then next we have HB 1319. This is the carbon pricing bill. We're going to blank out all the amounts of the tax and the credit back as we work to figure out what the right balance of this is going forward. Some additional technical amendments and defect the date to July 1st, 2050. Members, any comments?
Sure.
Yes.
I'm going to vote with reservations. You're blanking out the numbers, so I'll support moving the bill forward with blanked out numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, please take the vote.
All right. Chair recommends passing HB 1319 with amendments. Chair, Vice Chair vote aye. Any noting all members present, any reservations or noes? Reservation, Rep. Tokioka. Reservation with Rep. Peruso.
Reservations, Matsumoto.
Reservation Matsumoto.
Sorry, I'll be voting with reservations as well.
Okay.
But I do appreciate blanking the amounts.
Okay, so we have 4 ayes and 4 reservations. Measure passes.
Thank you. And House Bill 1350, for this bill, we're going to make the Office of Planning the entity tasked with implementing this instead of the council or OEQC. Make some technical amendments and defect the date to July 1st, 2050. Members, any comments? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Chair recommends HB 1350 pass with amendments. Chair, Vice Chair vote aye. Any noes or reservations? Hearing none, measure passes.
And House Bill 1318 relating to sustainability, we're going to adopt all the changes in the proposed draft offered by the Office of Planning. We're going to make some additional technical amendments and affect the date to July 1st, 2050 and move this forward for further discussion. Members, any comments? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Thank you. Chair recommends passing HB 1318 with amendments. Chair, Vice Chair vote aye. Any noes or reservations? Hearing none, measure passes.
Thank you. And then House Bill 842, we're going to, as was mentioned by the Environmental Council, match this up to language that we moved a similar bill out last year with similar amendments. So we're going to look at HB 2624 HD1 and adopt that language for the changes in this, which basically directs the office to establish an interactive website where you could sign up for notification of new actions and where you could also submit comments online. And we'll also make some technical amendments and note that there's an appropriation amount that would be appropriation would be needed to make this, for this work to be undertaken. We'll leave that blank for now and affect the date to July 1st, 2050. Members, any comments? All right, if not, Vice Chair.
Chair recommends passing HB 842 with amendments. Chair, Vice Chair vote aye. Any noes or reservations? Hearing none, measure passes.
Thank you. And House Bill 901, on this, we're going to also make some technical amendments to affect the date to July 1st, 2050. Move this forward for further discussion. Members, any comments? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Chair recommends passing with amendments. Chair, Vice Chair vote aye on HB 901. Any noes or reservations? Rep. Russo votes no. Anyone else? Hearing none, measure passes.
And next up, we have House Bill 557. This is the fossil fuel divestment bill. We're going to make some technical amendments and affect the date to July 1st, 2050, and move this forward for further discussion. Members, any comments? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Chair recommends passing HB 557 with amendments. Chair, Vice Chair vote aye. Any noes or reservations?
No.
No. No. Rep. Tokioka votes no. Any other? Hearing none, measure passes.
And House Bill 410 relating to tree planting, we're going to make a number of changes to this so that we'll turn it into a pilot program just in the DOE, not UH, and it will direct the DOE to establish a pilot project where students can receive graduation credit for tree planting programs. They'll be encouraged to work in partnership with agencies like DLNR and nonprofit organizations that do conservation work. And then we'll give the introducer of this bill further opportunity to work on it going forward. We'll defect the date to July 1st, 2050 and move this forward. Members, any comments?
I have a comment actually. I love the intentions and the tree loving nature of this bill. It does show we need to understand that trees are a huge investment. There's actually a lot of work that goes into preparing sites for trees. You have to have land to plant the trees on, and then someone has to water and weed those seedlings so they can get established. So I'm glad that it's staying alive with amendments so that we can support trees, but understand that they are not free. They come with a big investment.
All right, thank you. Please take the vote.
Okay. All right. Chair recommends passing HB 410 with amendments. Chair, Vice Chair vote aye. Any reservations or noes? Hearing none, measure passes.
Thank you. And then we have the two composting bills up for decision making from a prior agenda. And Vice Chair Martin worked on amendments to those. So we'll trade roles here. You want to pass over the vote sheets?
Sure.
And you can tell us your plan.
I might need to cheat on the numbers of the bill. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so these were measures heard in our last committee hearing, and HB 1349 is relating to statewide composting, and there was concerns by the Department of Health about the labor involved in improving their permitting system, making it more accessible. But within their current constraints, they have committed to working on that. One part of the bill was to make composting an allowable use in agricultural lands. So the bill has been amended to only have that component in it now. And I'm told that just that change, making composting and co-composting an allowable use in agricultural lands, will allow some outer island composting programs that have been on hold to move ahead. So while reduced in scope, it will still be meaningful.
All right.
So Vice Chair recommends passing with that significant amendment.
All right, thank you. Any comments, members? All right, if not, voting on House Bill 1349, recommendation to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye, noting all members present. Any noes or reservations? Recommendation is adopted.
All right, the other composting bill, which we heard at the last hearing, is HB 856. And that does two things. One is to clarify that composting and co-composting do not require a buffer zone, which is actually already the case. Only solid waste disposal facilities require a buffer zone. So the language was clarified. It also makes it clear that other things like recycling centers do not require a buffer zone. The other part of that bill states that artisanal scale composting, which means very small scale composting, which is restricted to plant materials, but can use stuff that is not produced on that same property. So somebody could get plant or food scraps from a neighbor or something like that. Does not require the same permitting system as the large composters. Out of deference to the Department of Health concerns, amendments were made that include a system where they will notify the Department of Health of their existence and collect data on what they are receiving. And should they be asked for by the Department of Health, they will provide that. This is an amendment that was made last year in the Senate, where this bill made it all the way through actually with those amendments. In addition to that, we added in specifying that these artisanal scale composters will not accept animal products, sewage, sludge, and treated lumber, things that are of health concerns. So Chair recommends passing with those significant amendments.
Thank you. So House Bill 856, recommendation to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Noting all members present, any noes or reservations? Recommendation is reservations from Rep. Tokioka. Aye from everyone else. Recommendation is adopted and we are adjourned.